All right, look, did y'all see this the other day? Amazon listed The Chosen as fiction. And Christians have absolutely lost their minds about it. I'm talking like petitions, whole response videos, thousands of comments about it. People acting like Amazon had just declared Jesus wasn't real. And maybe that's understandable. I get it. The Chosen matters to a lot of people. Mattered to me too. Watched the first couple seasons, enjoyed it, and I always get asked my opinion on it. So here you go. The more I watch the reaction from Christians, though, the more I've become convinced that Christians weren't actually angry about a category. They were angry about what that category revealed. Now stay with me, okay? Because I think this exposes a problem in the modern church we've either ignored or we've been completely blind to. And the scary part is that most of us, we're already, me included, participated in it. And before this video ends, I'm going to ask you one question. A question that you probably never stopped to answer. I hadn't whenever I came up to it. And I think it's going to hit harder than you expect. Now, before anybody starts typing, those keyboard warriors get in the comments, let's get something out of the way. Whether Amazon categorized the show correctly is almost completely irrelevant. That's not what we should be looking at. Always, something will be presented and people will gravitate towards it, but the really important thing is over here. So let's look at that. Because The Chosen is not scripture. The creators have never claimed that it was. Dallas Jenkins has said repeatedly that it is a dramatization, a historical adaptation, right? An interpretation designed to point people toward the Bible, sure, but not the Bible. That's not controversial. It's simply true. The show contains conversations that aren't recorded in Scripture. Private moments Scripture never describes. Scenes that had to be imagined. Dialogue that had never actually been written in the Bible. That's how dramatizations work. And I think for the most part, they do a great job of it. That's not the part that really interests me. Here's the part that interests me. I spent years in the film business. Right, before we ended up here in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. I know how productions get made. I know what gets written in those rooms. And I know what gets cut. I know what gets invented so that a story will actually work and be able to be presented in that particular format. So when I tell you The Chosen was always a traumatization, that's not a criticism. That's reality. Which brings me to the question. Why did so many Christians react as if Amazon had insulted Jesus himself? Why did a category on a streaming platform, why did it feel so personal? Because I don't think most people were defending a television show. I think they were defending something much deeper. I think that just hit a nerve. I think we've reached a point where millions of Christians spend more time with representations of Jesus than with Jesus himself. And if that sounds harsh, let me tell you something that happened. Not long ago, somebody quoted a scene from The Chosen to me as if it was scripture. They were sincere, good believers. They loved Jesus. Completely sincere about it. The problem was it wasn't in the Bible. But they were quoting it as if it was. It was from the show. And when I mentioned something about it, they were a little bit confused. They didn't quite understand the difference. But before we laugh at them, let's be honest. That's not really about them. That's about all of us. Because we live in a weird moment, y'all. Never before in human history have Christians had access to this much Christian content. Content that talks about the Bible, right? You got podcasts and sermons online, books, videos, whole social media, whole setups devoted to it. And yet biblical literacy continues to collapse. Think about that. We have more access to the Bible than any generation in history. And somehow many believers know more Christian personalities than actual biblical passages. They know more podcast hosts than they know about the prophets. And here's the uncomfortable part about all that, is that most Christians couldn't tell you how many hours they've spent consuming content, Christian content, right? Even in this month, right? But they know exactly how many chapters of the Bible they didn't read. Because deep down we know the difference. And here's what I find fascinating. When Amazon mislabeled a TV show, Christians mobilized overnight. Posts, videos, arguments. Thousands of people rushing to defend The Chosen. But when biblical literacy collapses, silence. When Christians stop reading Scripture, silence. When Christians know more about celebrity pastors than the actual words of Jesus, that's silence. We don't need to make a whole fuss about that. We got angry when Amazon labeled The Chosen as fiction. But hardly anybody seems angry that so many Christians have stopped reading the book that it was based on, the source material. And that's where this gets uncomfortable. Because this isn't really about The Chosen. The Chosen's just revealing something. It's revealing how easy it is to replace Jesus with consuming content about Jesus. Those are not the same thing. A person can spend hundreds of hours listening to sermons, listening to podcasts, and never develop an actual prayer life. You can watch every season of The Chosen and still barely know Scripture. You can consume Christian content every day and still remain spiritually immature, because it's not about consuming. Because information and transformation are very different things. And here's the danger with all this. When your understanding of Jesus comes primarily from content instead of actual Scripture, you will inevitably drift toward a version of Jesus that feels more comfortable than the actual real one. Not because anybody's trying to deceive you, but because that's what we do as human beings. We prefer manageable versions of God, right? We prefer the little gods that we make up in our own mind, the version of God that fits into our life very comfortably, that fits our politics, fits our preferences, our personality quirks. But the real Jesus had a habit of destroying every box people put him in. The real one offended religious leaders, offended political leaders, and offended the masses. The real Jesus said things so difficult that entire groups stopped following him altogether. The real Jesus is not nearly as easy to domesticate as we would like him to be. And that's exactly why Scripture matters. Because Scripture doesn't allow us to endlessly remake Jesus in our own image, to wiggle him into some box. It confronts us, corrects us, and it challenges us. And I think almost most importantly, it exposes us. It exposes me. The Bible is one of the few things left in modern life that refuses to become whatever you want it to become. And maybe that's why so many of us avoid it. It's easier to watch. It's easier to listen. Easier to consume, feels more palatable. But Christianity was never supposed to be outsourced. Because that's what you're doing. You're outsourcing who Jesus is to somebody else's version of it, as opposed to going to the source material. Wasn't supposed to be outsourced to your pastor or a director, show creator, influencers, or your TV set. Not even the channels that you like, not even this one. right? At our best, all of these things are supposed to be doors that point you to Him, not destinations. And maybe that's why this whole controversy is actually a gift for us. Because it forces us to ask a question that most of us never stop to consider. If every Christian podcast disappeared tomorrow, every Christian YouTube channel that you love, including this one, if all those conferences, if they disappeared, would you still know the Jesus of the Bible? Or have you slowly built your faith on all of these things that are pointing you to Him and counted those as actually Him? Because that's the question that actually matters. If it all went away, would you still know the Jesus of the Bible? Or are you looking to other people to define who He is? Because that's the question that actually matters. Not what category Amazon used. Not what label appeared on some streaming platform. Who cares? The real question is whether you've become so dependent on representations of Christ that we've neglected Christ Himself. Because no actor can replace Him, no creator can replace Him, nor can any pastor or content creator. And no adaptation, no matter how good, can ever carry the authority of the Word itself. Maybe Amazon didn't expose a problem with The Chosen. Maybe Amazon accidentally exposed a problem with us. The greatest threat to your content, the greatest threat to your faith, may not be bad content. It may be allowing good content to become a substitute for the real thing. And if that stings a little bit, good. Because it stung me too when I started thinking about it. Because I have those content creators I love, those podcast hosts, those pastors. If this landed with you today, share it. Because somebody just came to mind right now who probably needs to hear this, who's leaning on those things too hard, and just turn back to the Word. I'll see y'all out here. Find Jesus, fight culture, and spread the good news.